Hello. We're going to live through the events of a true story, which once happened to my close friend Jim. It may sound unbelievable, crazy even, but tonight I invite you to travel back in time with me to the point where this thrilling story began. To make sense of what happened later, we'll need to piece together the events of that night years ago when Jim's car broke down miles from anywhere out in the Nevada desert. So, one day, like many of us, Jim decided to take a leap of faith and move from New York, where we had both lived, to sunny LA, chasing his dream to become a movie director. Having packed, he said goodbye to his friends and he drove through the whole country to the west. His plan was to get to Chicago, take Route 66, and drive straight to the West Coast. Simple, right? So I have no idea how he found that place in the cold, dark desert night. So, just imagine. Open amid the unfamiliar landscape in the middle of nowhere. No cell coverage. The only signs of civilization are a ramshackle pylon and that old rickety fence. Literally nothing except maybe a few dark, brooding, and ominous silhouettes of cacti against the starry sky. And there was Jim, stranded at the side of the road. I laughed a lot when he told me how many times he had tripped over those stones, walking around the car in the dark to see what was wrong. So, what was wrong exactly? Well, in the case of Jim's car, it would be easier to say what wasn't wrong. In fact, at that time, I found it easier to believe his crazy story than the idea of him making it to LA in that old banger. Let's take a look at her. A lovely bright red. This, as well as the slightly fogged chrome of the bumpers, front molding, and lights, were the only Cadillac-ish thing about her. You know, what could a young, aspiring filmmaker afford after all? But honestly, Jim, you could have done some basic maintenance and checked the tires. You're right. It was a flat tire. Not a big deal, you may think. Let's find out. You know what has always amazed me about Jim was how he managed to combine his recklessness with his cautiousness. Even now, in this God-forsaken place, he didn't forget to put a triangle reflector out. So, what does it take to change a flat tire usually? Usually, a jack and a lug wrench. But in Jim's case, it took... let's see. Wow, what an arsenal. That was my first reaction as well. The story is silent about it. But for some totally unexplainable reason, it also took him 2 cans of oil. You know, Jim's always been talking about finding his mechanical instinct under pressure. So maybe it was one of those under-pressure moments. Because who else could have come up with the idea of propping up the car with a brick, if not Jim? The day when Jim came to say goodbye, the Everest of things he'd packed on top of his car seemed like a monument to our life together in New York. And do you see that ball on top of the pile? Those lovely days when we used to play football for hours in the park. I remember one day Jim missed a shot, and the ball ended up in the street smashing the window in Mr. Pizzorno's cafe. Ooh, what a storm of emotions followed it. No wonder Jim decided to take the famous peacemaking broom that we used to clean up the mess with him. but we weren't always that bad. We even won a trophy at high school, and it wasn't just football. We used to take road trips to Coney Island in my car, listening to our favorite tunes on the boombox. Those carefree days, we just messed around all day on the beach. And that's where that life preserver comes from. It's just Jim being Jim. Do you see those 2 bottles of Chianti? It was a farewell gift from Mr. Pizzorno. He'd brought it from Italy. They actually got on really well after the window accident and were friends for many years. There must be a farewell gift from me somewhere that Jim promised to unbox as soon as he reached California. And this is not the only gift I gave him, actually. There was also a bowl with Japanese goldfish. I'm not sure what happened to the goldfish, but I believe it was when Jim got really interested in Asian culture, especially meditation techniques and yoga. It's amazing what a simple bowl with water can do, right? Remember I told you about Jim's fantastic ability to combine unseen recklessness with strict cautiousness? He did it again. Look at this pole sticking out that he used to mark the bulky cargo on his vehicle. So inventive. You see these vintage suitcases? They got style, right? We were lucky to find them at one of the street sales in Brooklyn. Jim was planning to visit Japan to see his girlfriend Nozomi, and he wanted to impress her. Oh, Jim. And they were a lovely couple. Nozomi took him to the Sakura Garden with one of those mysterious Shinto gates. That's where that bonsai tree came from. Did you know that you have to water this bonsai from a special can? It must be hidden somewhere there as well. You think a bonsai tree and a special watering can is too much to bring with you for a trip? Wait a second. How about a 2-string guitar Jim brought from Tijuana just because it was something that Carlos Santana himself would like to play? He even printed and framed some of the photos from our Mexican trip. Do you see the market stall in it? I took this photo while the woman behind the stall was talking Jim into buying a pair of Indiana Jones vintage boots. She obviously had the gift of the gab, as Jim left with the boots and 3 authentic Mexican tablecloths. I still can't believe it. I've known the man since I was a kid, and he's always been some sort of a collector. We were neighbors, and my parents didn't mind if I stayed over at Jim's. He had something priceless for any 10-year-old boy at the time. A real pirate chest full of toys. Once his parents bought him a video game console as a Christmas present. And we used to stay up all night on that thing, kicking each other's 8-bit heads in, crowning over minor victories, and howling in mock serious yet also really serious anguish at knockouts. Obviously, these 2 suitcases weren't enough to pack up all the belongings. Especially when you're taking the whole fridge with you. I still can't believe that he took it with him. It has strange sentimental value to me. Have any of the fridges in your life had any sentimental value to you? Well, I guess the same applies to the old TV set. One way or another, what didn't surprise me at all was his vintage radio set. In high school, we got into radio electronics. We found this buddy at one of those Brooklyn street sales, and Jim could spend hours configuring the radio to receive the signals from outer space. You want to know what's beside the radio set? Oh, it's his lucky bobbin film with his first one-reeler. We spent the whole weekend in his parents' basement. Jim was setting up and shooting scenes for the Star Trek-inspired blockbuster, while I was obediently adjusting the light for that perfect shot. Back then, I already knew that Jim had found his passion. But to this very day, I still have no clue what he saw in that boat. That's the greatest mystery about him for me. Every time I asked him why on earth he even grabbed a paddle and a fishing rod with it, he just shrugged his shoulders. I really have no idea which laws of physics help that rope to stay tied. But I'm sure that we got a little distracted from what happened that night. Before we had given way to nostalgic flashbacks, we left Jim sitting on the camping chair and fixing a flat tire. So, it's a starry desert night. No sign at all of what is to come next. Well, almost no sign, except for a newspaper under the brick propping up the car. And probably a metal plate lying on the road that Jim recklessly ignored. Can you believe it? That was a difficult moment in Jim's story. But trust me that most of the craziness still lies ahead. Let me thank you and wish you a good night's sleep. And if you feel like discovering the truth behind that Nevada Times article, you should know that this isn't the end of Jim's story. It's just the beginning.